You should argue more. What? I should argue more? Am I not already arguing enough? Isn't argument scary and wrong and might endanger my relationships even? If those were some thoughts that you're familiar with, that might have been going through your mind when I just said that, I'd strongly suggest you to keep watching this video. Especially as women, we are socialized in a way where we feel that argument, discussion, conflict is something scary and something that we should avoid at all costs. Argument is bad. Argument is going to harm our relationships. Argument and having conflicts with people leads to emotional outbursts, leads to rage. It might lead to like physical aggression and so on. I'm sorry to tell you, but that is not the truth. That might be your learning experience. Maybe you grew up in an abusive home. Maybe you grew up with people who are not able to handle conflict effectively. But argument does not have to have that as a consequence. Argument does not have to be scary. Arguments don't mean that people are shouting at each other and, becoming all personal, becoming all emotional, becoming all aggressive. That is not healthy conflict. But it is most definitely possible to argue in a healthy way. And in today's video, I want to teach you how you can do that. Why are you so afraid of conflict? A lot of people really romanticize this idea of being a people pleaser and being a mediator and being very peaceful and to themselves. And, I've been that way as well. I've also been telling myself that I'm just a person that doesn't really address things as much, that I'm more, laid back, and usually I'm not really part of a conflict. But after a while, I started to wonder, why am I never part of a conflict exactly? Why am I never one conflict party, but rather always the mediating person that is trying to solve the issue between two people? And then I realized that most probably I was scared of having fights. And in fact, I was so scared of having fights that I would never, or very, very rarely, ever say if something was wrong, if my boundaries had been overstepped by someone, or when I was just not fine with something. I would just not address it. I would only address it when I couldn't go any longer without that. And even then, I would still have a bad conscience and would feel like I was endangering the relationship to the person that I was having the argument with. And that, I know for a fact that is something that goes through many people's minds, especially women, who are more agreeable than men on average. And I want to tell you that this is some very, very dysfunctional way of thinking. This is probably due to some learning experiences you've made. You maybe learned that conflict is associated with danger, that conflict is associated with relationships turning worse, but in reality, that does not have to be the case. When we're scared of something, we should first identify why we're scared of the very thing, and then work against being scared of that. So, okay, why are you scared exactly of having conflicts? What is so scary about the idea of arguing with someone? First of all, in order to have an argument, you have to assert your own opinion. And when your self-esteem is sort of low and you don't think that you have such smart things to say, then asserting your own opinion is scary and maybe even unnerving. And you might fear making mistakes when you voice your own opinion. That is one reason. Also, you might be scared of the unknown. You might be scared of the reaction of the other person, especially when you've made experiences where the other person was kind of uncontrollable, was doing unpredictable things, was maybe even acting in a violent manner as a response to conflict. So that is something that you could also be scared of. A lot of people are also scared of being misunderstood or of miscommunication in general. They're scared that they are not gonna be able to make themselves heard properly. They're scared that what they're saying is gonna really fall onto wrong ears and that, they're just gonna be misunderstood and not taken seriously, for example. That is also something that I was very scared of. I was scared that I was not going to be able to put what I want to say properly, and so I wouldn't say it at all. But that is the very first mistake, because if you never say something and if you never practice to communicate something, you'll just get worse at it and you'll just become more scared of it. And the anxiety just perpetuates and grows bigger and bigger, and it becomes more and more difficult to address it. So that is really the wrong way to go about it. And then the ultimate thing that I think is the most scary and most unnerving about conflicts is that people fear that the conflicts they're having might affect their relationships in a negative way. They might fear that they lose intimacy, that they lose closeness to the person, that they might lose a relationship overall in general. And what I want to tell you here is that if you lose someone because you're having an argument, then that person was not supposed to be in your life in the first place. A healthy relationship involves conflict, okay? And there's no way around it. In a healthy relationship, you don't work around things, you work through things. And when you're scared of having a discussion with your partner, when you're so scared that you're avoiding conflict all the time, you're just delaying that conflict, okay? You should never be scared of having an argument in a healthy relationship. And ultimately, what we're also scared of is, I think, just the emotional discomfort of it all. It's not nice to argue. We want to be understood, we want to be loved, or we want to be in harmony with the other person, and arguing is just not that. And that is also a reason why we're scared of it. So, to conclude it all, avoiding conflict might alleviate your anxiety in the short term, but in the long term, it leads to problems that are far bigger than just an argument, okay? So it perpetuates fear, and also what avoiding conflict and arguments leads to is that you just keep feeding the idea that you're not built for conflict, that you can't have an argument, that you can't discuss something, that you're not good at that. And that is especially dangerous, because when you keep feeding this idea of you not being a person that can argue, you're never going to put yourself in situations where you have to argue. And so you just can't learn it. It's a vicious cycle. You feed this idea, you identify yourself as a people pleaser, as a mediator, as a very agreeable person, and ultimately you're not getting your needs met. You can't have meaningful relationships because meaningful relationships involve conflict. This is just a precondition for closeness, is to be able to argue with that person. If you can't, then you're not having a close relationship. I'm sorry. You might wonder right now, okay, I'm a people pleaser. I haven't had an argument in a hot minute, and I kind of understand what you're saying, and I'm actually kind of scared of conflict. Okay, what do I do about it now? So, first of all, I want you to see your thoughts for what they are. Just thoughts. You might think, oh my gosh, this fight will ruin my relationship. Oh my gosh, I just can't handle arguments in general, and I can't handle this argument in particular for ABC reasons. Those are just thoughts. But the problem with those thoughts is that they lead to behavior. And that behavior that they're leading to is avoidance, okay? So you need to identify this pattern. I really want you to take a step back. The next time you're in an argument or you're in a situation that gets kind of heated, I want you to really listen to your thoughts, the thoughts that you're having, and to identify them as just thoughts. And instead of taking that avoidance action, I want you to go into the argument. So first step is to identify those dysfunctional thoughts that you're having in situations that involve argument, okay? I want you to take the bird perspective and see it from above. See how ridiculous your thoughts are. If you're really, if you're kind of starting to, argue with your partner a little, and then your thoughts come in and say, oh my gosh, he's going to break up with me. Oh my gosh, this is over. Oh, this is such a catastrophe. See yourself, see the situation from above. See what situation you're in right now. This is not the end of it all. This is an argument that you'll need to stay in and that you need to carry out. The next step is to accept. Accept that you're in an argument right now. Okay, the anxiety comes creeping up. You start to feel your heart racing. You start to feel uncomfortable. You maybe start to get the desire to leave the room, to flee the situation. But this time, I want you to stay. I want you to fight, but fight properly, okay? We're going to come to that later, how you're going to fight properly, but I want you to stay in that situation and accept that you're going to feel anxious, that you're going to feel uncomfortable, because that's normal. It's normal to not feel great in an argument, okay? So I want you to really face those emotions, to feel them and to accept them. They're there and they're okay. And you'll just need to get through them, because this is the only way you're going to work through the argument properly. So maybe something that you could say, sort of a phrase, is, okay, I feel anxious right now, but it's still important to address this issue. It's still important to have this conversation. Next step is to stay present. What we also do a lot of the times is that we're not being really present in the situation of argument. We're kind of ruminating about the past, ruminating about past conflicts that haven't turned out very well, or even worrying about the future, about the outcome of the argument, and that leads us to not be present. But it is absolutely crucial to be present in an argument. You have to have a sharp mind. You have to be able to listen and to speak properly. Those are the tools that you have to rely on when you're having an argument, listening and speaking. And you can't do that properly when you're just someplace else in your mind. That can also be disrespectful to your partner or to the person you're having an argument with. You have to stay present. So I really want you to be in that situation, feel the emotions, and stay where you are. Another reason why arguments turn very bad, very wild, and very emotional is that you're taking things personally that are not meant to be taken personally. What I mean by this is that a lot of the times when we're having an argument, the other person criticizes something that we did. You cannot allow what happens in that conflict to dictate the way you feel about yourself. You cannot let that change your self-worth or your self-identity. You should really take a step back and stay distanced from that. Don't take this personally. Even if the other person is saying, oh, you're such a narcissist, oh, you're so self-centered, don't let that dictate your view of yourself too much, okay? Be stable in yourself. This is the only way that you're not going to get all defensive and shoot back, because this is exactly what turns an argument into a toxic argument. Taking things personally and overstepping boundaries because you're just so emotional in that situation, okay? So recognize that disagreements are not a reflection of your self-worth, but rather that they're situational. The problem with many of us people pleasers is that we don't really know our boundaries. We don't really know what we want from the other person, and we don't really know how we want to be treated. And the problem is, if we're not certain about this ourselves, other people will feel that. And then this is just like an open invitation, an open door to toxic people to enter your life and to overstep those boundaries that you're not even sure about yourself. And this is exactly where you have to intervene. And how do you intervene? By becoming clear about your values, your boundaries, and your non-negotiables. There are certain things that are never okay in no context, okay? They're never, ever okay. For example, physical violence. It is never okay for someone to hit you, to beat you, and to abuse you physically. That's just a non-negotiable for many of us, okay? Others might be like more individual, but this should be non-negotiable for everyone, all right? And if you really want to learn to argue effectively, you'll have to be clear on those boundaries, values, and non-negotiables. It's important to not just have those values like written down somewhere and know about those values. It's important that you actually embody them, live them authentically. And how do you do that? Is you become your own protector in a sense, okay? It's your job and your job only to protect your boundaries. And I see this as a huge problem. We are so eager to help to defend other people's boundaries and to help defend other people, but we rarely ever do that for ourselves. And that is such a huge problem. You are the only person that knows your list of boundaries, non-negotiables, and values, and you're the only person responsible and able to defend those. And you have to do this also in conflict. It should be a necessity. It should be absolutely mandatory for you to step up and say something when your boundary is being crossed. And a lot of the times with ourselves, we're kind of negotiating with ourselves in our own minds. Oh, yeah, that was against our boundaries. That was against our values. But we don't want to cause any harm. Instead of negotiating with yourself, you should negotiate with the other person that overstepped your boundaries. Okay? Don't handle this within. This is a problem, especially for us women, I feel like. We're always handling fights within. No. This fight is supposed to be held outside because the problem exists outside. Another person overstepped your boundaries. Don't handle this within yourself. Don't negotiate with yourself. Your boundaries are tight, okay? Your boundaries are solid, rock solid, and there's no way that anyone is going to argue around those, okay? So really have that self-worth as well. It's a question of self-worth at the end of the day. To identify those boundaries, to identify the boundaries that have been crossed, and then to address that. It is important that when you address that, you're assertive, okay? So you're expressing your own feelings, defending your own rights, and simultaneously you should still respect the other person's rights as well. So don't become all disrespectful or defensive because someone crossed your boundaries. Be assertive, be certain, but be respectful, because this is the only way that you can argue constructively. And this does not just go for your own boundaries. You should also respect the other person's boundaries, okay? So you should listen to their cues. You should ask for permission. You should listen carefully to their boundaries as well. So once you've gotten clear about that, I also want to give you some tips for what to do during the argument. First of all, listen. This is so easy. You think that is self-explanatory. Of course you should listen. You can't just, disrespect someone by not listening. But by listening, I mean to listen properly. Listen without interruptions. Allow that other person to talk. Try to view what they're saying objectively and clearly. And, allow the other person to express their feelings and thoughts. Give them room. This is a problem that when you start interrupting the other person, you're sort of endangering them. You're sort of invading their space. First of all, let them talk. Once they finish talking, it's not done. The listening process is not done, okay? Because this was also a problem for me a lot of the times. I listened, but I didn't really understand. It's mandatory in order to have a proper fight, a proper argument, an argument that doesn't end in disaster. You have to ask questions. Ask clarifying questions. Once you're not 100% sure about something, just say, okay, you said this and that. I didn't quite get that. Please elaborate. Then you're also going to want to paraphrase, okay? This is when I actually started understanding what the other person tried to say. A lot of the times I thought, hey, I got that. Then I paraphrased it and the other person said, no, well, actually, I meant something else, I meant it this and that way. And this is the only way that you can make sure that you actually get what that person was trying to say. And this is the only way that you can avoid this sort of miscommunication that we're so scared of. The same goes for speaking. There are also some rules for you, what you want to say. Before you say anything, ask yourself 3 questions. Is what I want to say true? Is what I want to say kind? And is what I want to say useful? And when you have to say no to any of these 3 questions, you don't say it. Okay? Be careful about what you say, because once you said it, it's very difficult to take it back. Of course, you can apologize and so on, but I'd really strongly suggest you to filter things before you say them out loud and not afterwards. If you really filter everything you think about and really consider these three attributes, then most likely what you're going to say is going to be well received and appropriate for the situation. And this is so important for de-escalating a situation. If you consider these 3 attributes, kindness, usefulness, and truth, then it's very unlikely that you're going to upset the other person. Of course, it is also dependent on the other person, but this keeps the situation professional in a sense, okay? It keeps the situation from escalating completely, and this is what you want. You want to keep it as rational as possible. Of course, it's an emotional situation, but you don't want to make the person become defensive, because this is when the whole situation is going to go bad, when the other person feels that they're being attacked, when the other person takes what you say personally. So you should really consider what you're saying. And then the ultimate goal of the whole conflict should be to identify the true source of it all. A lot of the times we, especially if we're not very good at arguing, we're arguing on surface level. We're getting lost in detail and just, going in circles. But a lot of the times, the underlying cause for arguments that you're having are very similar. And once you're able to identify those, you've basically mastered your conflict. That is basically your common goal that you should have with the person you're having an argument with. Identifying the causes and working on them. And as an example, one big need of us human beings is to be appreciated and understood. And this need can be hurt in various situations. For example, if a friend doesn't listen to you and instead scroll through their TikTok or something like that, you're not feeling seen, you're not feeling accepted, you're not feeling appreciated. But this could also be when your partner forgets to, take out the trash for the 5th time this week. You might also feel very, not appreciated, not seen, not loved as well, Those are different situations. And when you're not very good at arguing, you're going to stay on that surface level. Oh, you never take out the trash. Why are you so lazy? I always have to do everything on my own. And in the other situation, it would be, oh my gosh, you never listen to me. You're always scrolling through your phone. You're so addicted to your phone, blah, blah, blah. This is not constructive, because the underlying need that has been hurt is not being addressed. When you practice to argue properly, you're going to identify that the real need, the real want that is hurt in both those situations is the need for appreciation. And once you identify that that is the wound that is sort of hurting, you can fix that. The person might not be so motivated to take out the trash next time, but if they think about the fact that you as a person are not feeling seen or appreciated if they don't do that certain thing, that just makes it that much deeper. And that makes them that much more motivated to actually change something about their behavior. Yeah, I hope you argue a lot more in the future and realize that arguing and fixing the underlying issues is actually crucial to have meaningful relationships. Yeah, those tips have definitely helped me become a better arguing party. I hope they're going to help you as well. And I see you guys in the next video. Bye.